what do people believe that they're most afraid of when it comes
Mhm.
to death, and what are they really afraid of?
Yeah. Well, this is a bit of a gotcha question, isn't it? In the sense that what do people think they're afraid of and what are they actually afraid of? And of course, in so doing, you're pointing out some deep running error in a lot of dying people's take on their dying, which is not the most fashionable thing to say. We should, before I answer your question properly, I should just acknowledge that there is a running gag in the dominant culture of North America that goes like this: dying people are hip. Dying people, they get it. Dying people are down with their crazy life. Dying people can't be fooled. Dying people have got it figured out. You understand what I'm saying? That there's kind of some kind of practical wisdom that ensues as a result of a terminal diagnosis that the rest of us are just floundering without. Okay, you can tell by the way I'm saying this. Dude, I never saw that. I was there for a long time. I never saw a terminal diagnosis turn somebody into a spiritual genius. If I did, I'd be happy to report that to you, but I never saw it. So that's a big deal, right? So what do people come into their dying time in Anglo North America? We should, be clear that overly generalizing doesn't help anybody. But in Anglo North America, what I found is people principal fear going in was the pain, the unthinkable, unmitigated, untreatable 3 a.m. Sleepless, in the grip of a midnight terror that you cannot resolve. That was the principal fear, and properly so. I mean, we all get that, hopefully, right? And it's nothing to sneeze at. It's nothing to sneer about. But what I'm saying to you is that given the skill that the doctors I work with had in terms of pain management and all the rest, that scenario almost never came to pass. So here's a math formula. If dying people's worst fears never came to pass, I never doesn't mean absolutely, but generally speaking, never came to pass, right? That sounds like it's a recipe for good dying. If your fears never materialize, surely to God, you're on the upside, on the upswing. It's basically goodness and mercy from here on out. And if that were true, you and I wouldn't be talking about this, because there'd be nothing to report except another fine day at the palliative care unit. That's all we'd have to say, where everything's unfolding as it should and everybody's good. But that's not a palliative care unit, not in Anglo North America. It's full of people who are writhing, with an unspoken and often unspeakable low-grade terror that never breaks the surface of speech, never comes to the attention of the attendees and the professional caregivers, and even of the families. See, and it turns into, quote, a diagnosis of depression or a diagnosis of dissociative state mania or whatever it is. I'm telling you, I took a long time to look at this, and it wasn't fun. And I'm here to faithfully report to you that the reason that good death never abounded from good pain and symptom management is because principally people were wrong about what they were most afraid of. They didn't know they were wrong, and often they never discovered that they were wrong. But they were, because there was something else, something that never drew much attention to itself. And my best way of expressing it is this: their great undigested, undiagnosed, and unsought fear was what was to become of them after they died. Not in terms of what happens next and are there red lights on the left and green lights on the right, not that kind of guided tour thing, but really and truly it was this: they feared most the distinct possibility bordering on likelihood that they, as a consequence of their demise, would disappear more or less without a trace in fairly short order from among the living. That last part is a big one, because it's actually, this fear is a consequence of how the people around them were likely to proceed in the wake of their death, which they themselves were alert to. Why? Because they were so prescient about the future? Nope. It's because they finally realized that when, in all the deaths in their life that preceded their own oncoming death now, virtually each and every time, they practiced this strange incantation called getting on with your life, right? Of closure, right? That they practiced that. They got on with their lives after a fitting time of disturbance or grief or missing or whatever it was. And they got rid of the clothing from the closet, didn't they? And they turned the page, didn't they? And perhaps they remarried, didn't they? Or were happy with the kids that survived, didn't they? And so on and so on. And yes, there was a little bit of like a phantom limb syndrome from time to time regarding the person who had died. But by and large, the mania of the culture to proceed and to progress and to grow no matter what had them by the short hairs for the balance of their life. And that's why they knew by the time they came into their own dying time, the likelihoods were very good that the whole import and consequence of their lives would disappear without a trace, slip below the surface of the ordinary day of the people who were still alive in their passing. You see, intuitively, they knew how easy it was in our way of life to lose the dead, because we actually use the phrase, don't we? As if it were a synonym for dying. I lost so-and-so. The way we do it, you bet you did. That was their great fear. And virtually nobody ever said that to me, right? So you might say, okay, wise guy, is this just you talking? Or, I mean, how do you know if nobody ever told you this? Okay, thanks for asking. I'll give you an example of where it came from. So by that time, this sort of mini digital technology was beginning to appear. Small phones and all the rest, small screens. And people were beginning to make these home movies. That's what I'll call them. And most of you who are listening to this know what I'm referring to. A home movie, a person sets up either a screen or a mic or both, and they begin to dispense a kind of timeless and rather banal, if I may put it this way, wisdom that's supposed to ensue as a result of them reflecting upon the ending of their days and so forth. And I don't mean to sound cynical, but it's like suffering through a lot of wedding speeches, you know? The truth of the matter is they're not that great. There's not a lot of wisdom there. But okay, it's just no problem. Relax your standards and get through it. Okay, it's not a problem. But here's the thing. I would routinely ask them why they're making the videos. And they would look at me like I'm a simpleton. I can't figure it out on my own. I have to be told. I do have to be told. This is how I found out what the greatest fears are, you see. So why are you making these home movies? Oh, so they can play them at, you know what, I won't be at my kid's wedding, right? So they'll play this instead and everybody will cry and it'll be a thing, you know, and I'll be able to speak from beyond the grave. Right. Okay. Well, the film will, as long as they don't lose it. Yes. But that's what you're hoping for. But I'm wondering why you need to make a movie in order to see to it that you'll have a presence at this event that you're not going to live long enough to see. That's what I'm wondering. And at which point it's a much harder question to answer. And so I'll give you the general answer that came forward. I'm not persuaded that without my influence, without my say-so, and without my little movie, I am going to have any presence at those events that I won't live long enough to see. Because it's asking too much of the people who claim to love me to really actively remember me day in and day out. And so on these high water events, I'm just going to ask them to press play instead. And that's a confession, man. That's a confession about a degree of cultural poverty that borders on the unspeakable and, to a certain degree at least, terrifying. That's how I know.